Our creed says the flesh is weak, and so it is. That is why we strive to improve upon it and replace it, as the machine god desires. But we abandon his numerous gifts at our peril. To give up one's soul is the greatest sin of my religion. The soul must be understood, not despised.
I may have gone a bit too hard on the intro, but I'll explain. If you take monks, mechanics, and Christianity, what do you get? Depending on who you ask, you'll probably get a bunch of different interpretations on what this could mean. A religious machine cult is a really compelling premise to start off with, but going through with it and making it unique can be pretty difficult. A few things I can think of off the top of my head are the Church of the Broken God from the SCP Foundation, the Vodiani from Endless Space, and E4s working in a motor pool. You can get a lot of variation on such a simple concept of machine worship. In some cases, the machines are alive, they're malevolent, or otherworldly. There's no real right way to do a machine cult in the same way that there's no real right way to do religion in general. I mean, how many variations are there of Christianity? It was until I saw the Adeptus Mechanicus, and oh boy, is there a right way to do a machine cult. If you've watched the previous video, then hello, I am the man in the broken tower, and while the name sounds depressing, the content is anything but. Usually. The Adeptus Mechanicus were the first ever faction I got into, if you don't count me window shopping Necrons to start off with. At first, when I discovered Admech, I just saw robes, robots, and cool robot tentacles, as opposed to the not cool fleshy tentacles. I said this in my first video, but my first ever box was the old Start Collecting Adeptus Mechanicus box, which was probably the greatest value in the history of Warhammer 40k. Now you have to pay like double for arguably a worse version. Even after 300 years, the British are still trying to find ways to take our money. I painted up that kit with shitty craft paint, as I mentioned previously, and I still do have the models somewhere in a drawer. They solidified to me what I wanted my color scheme to be and how I pretty much would develop my style of painting from then on. Functional, not flashy. Okay, but sometimes flashy. So what is the Adeptus Mechanicus? Lore-wise, during the Dark Age of technology, Mars and Terra were the most advanced planets in the Imperium. Well, the Proto-Imperium. Mars was terraformed into a verdant planet. I like to think of how Mercury used to look like in Destiny. It was a real garden world. Then the Age of Strife happens, Mars got giga-nuked during an intense civil war. This becomes a theme. Warp storms engulfed the galaxy thanks to, I think, the birth of Slaanesh, and Mars fell back into disarray. Those that survived in deep underground where technology failing truly meant life or death, leading those engineers being the ones who carried Mars on their backs. This lasts for a very long time, and after Big E unified all of Terra, he realized he was going to need some help from his neighbor. Mars had been converted to the idea of the machine god, and when Space God shows up, well, what do? They assume he must be an incarnation of what they believe in. Big E hates religion. He doesn't agree with it on a fundamental level, but the Adeptus Mechanicus are too important to kick off the war machine that would be the Great Crusade for. Primarchs are strong, and so is Big E, but he can't construct Warlord Titans. Neither can Vulcan, or maybe Vulcan, but Vulcan's not fast enough to arm billions of men and women. The Mechanicus, or the Mechanicum at the time, had all their industry still somewhat preserved and ready to start off. The Emperor of Mankind went to the Martian Parliament and pledged protection to them in exchange for their services. But most importantly, he would respect their sovereignty. Mars and Terra would become equals, and that is why the Imperial Aquila has two heads. One is for Terra, and the other is for Mars. This is actually the third iteration of this script. The third was a loose wording on my first few games playing Admech back on Tabletop Simulator. The second was me nerding out about everything without cohesion, and I wanted to try and make this at least a little bit more cohesive. I think I mostly want to talk about what makes Admech unique and what makes them actually kind of funny. The tech is a big thing, but what's the tech without the people who use it? Admech is split into two different armies ever since it was introduced back in 7th edition. The Skitarii and the Cult Mechanicus. We have white phosphorus weapons, smart bullet coil guns, giga vibro blades, but let's take this kind of slowly. The Skitarii are the backbone of the Mechanicus' army, and they're pretty much heavily modified guardsmen that are given weird and esoteric weaponry. Rangers are the more normal of them, wearing cloaks and colored red to blend in with the Martian terrain. They're armed with galvanic rifles, and it's kind of hard to explain what they are because there's not really a hard definition, but what's known about them currently is that they're basically mini EMP guns firing smart bullets. Bullets are called servitor bullets, and basically they do what you think they do. I think they're called, it wasn't DARPA rounds, it was something else, but they're bullet technology that was made and or is being used, nobody really knows because DARPA. It's able to change its trajectory mid-flight and hit a moving target much more easily. Also, these guns, when fired at an enemy, I'm talking about 40k now, not real life, when a galvanic rifle is fired at an enemy, it can actually like short out their circuits if they're mechanical in nature. This is actually done in Mechanicus, the video game, where you can use it to overload somebody's weapon and they won't be able to use it for a turn. Oh, and then there's the Transuranic Arquebus, this massive sniper rifle on a monopod. Turns out it's not a massive sniper rifle, it's an anti-tank rifle. It overpenetrates tanks, and the resulting energy and pressure from the overpenetration literally cuts everything on the inside of the tank to ribbons. Oh no, it gets worse though, don't you worry. There's the Skitarii Vanguard, who, guess what they have? Radiation guns, hazardous to the user and even more hazardous to the enemy. Because if a squad of Vanguard are firing at a target in concentration, the amount of radiation that is expelled onto the target will create a miniature localized rad storm appearing at the point of impact. They also use these guys as batteries. Sicarians, infiltrators, and ruststalkers, weird murderous pit droids of the 41st millennia. The infiltrators are actually the less interesting ones, armed with caloprods that can send you to God in 0.2 seconds flat, as well as SMGs that fire a million tiny darts that seek out their target. And then there's ruststalkers. See those X-Acto blades they wield? Those are transonic blades. Everything in the universe gives off a resonant frequency, and the blades are able to match it and cut through whatever they're hitting at the molecular level. Why? I ain't gotta explain shit. Then we hit the cult units. Back in ye olden times, there was a rule called Canticles of the Omnissiah, where you could roll or choose a buff you wanted for your army to get. In 9th edition, these only applied to cult units, those who are very much indoctrinated into the cult Mechanicus. Contrary to popular belief, Skitarii are literally just guardsmen, so they are probably adopting the cult mindset, but they're not as fervent as the rest of the tech priests. Speaking of, let's talk about their weapons and gear. Obviously, servo skulls are a big thing, basically just floating skulls meant to do menial tasks or bother the enemy, but now we're getting to the goofy shit. White phosphorus revolvers, death rays, literal base cannons, and antimatter pistols, the list goes on. You're probably asking yourself, why does a tech priest need to be so heavily armed? Well, dear listener, that is because tech priests are fucking paranoid. Take a person who is secretive and protective of the knowledge that they found to the point they are not willing to upload it into a database, and then you have a bunch of Chaos Space Marines knocking on their front door. What will the mighty tech priest do? Cower in fear and send droves of Skitarii to die as meat shields while they drown out the enemy? No, he tells the server to grab the fuck you ray gun and slaps it on. It's one of the things that I really love about tech priests is that most of the time they're underestimated, and for good reason. They're cowardly, paranoid, and definitely have some form of mental illness from removing so much flesh and being so old. They look feeble. But then you remember that these guys are the most important figures in the faction, and they make and own everything. Of course, exploratory, we will allow you to mount a cyclonic missile launcher onto your back to appease the machine spirit. Ave Omnissiah, motherfucker. Most of the tech priests you meet in games or in books are usually what you think, cowardly nerds. But then you have Magi, or Magi Dominus. I forget the term actually, and I call myself an Admech fan. But battle tech priests with centuries of experience that have already calculated the outcome of a battle before they even step foot onto it. If you see them, then the odds are probably in their favor and it's not going to go well for you. There's stories of tech priests suplexing Marines, a cohort of them fighting off Emperor's children in melee. There was one dude who literally just screams and overloads the Skitarii systems and he just croaks on the spot. Personally speaking, I have had Call, this guy, charge into melee with an Imperial Knight and win. They can be stubborn and powerful when you need it the most, and having access to some of the best gear and best buffs in the army, yet people overlook them and assume they're weak. The Phos Phoenix, one of my favorite relics of all time back in 8th and 9th edition, was a souped up Phosphor Serpenta that in-game gave it additional shots, so you're just fanning the hammer on a white phosphorus revolver and it burns through cover. It was so deadly and dangerous that the tech priest who found the STC destroyed it so it could never be created again and was executed by the same weapon. Fucking love this faction. We're not even done. The Cybernetica cohort is a bunch of robots underneath the AdMech that serve them, not AI working off of very basic programming. However, there is a group of them that travel on the surface of Mars alone without a datasmith ordering them, and they protect those who need it. Definitely not AI, fellas. I swear, they're just robots. That's another thing that make AdMech fun, is just all their hypocrisies. They have such an intense and well-documented religious doctrine that there are literally Bible quotes in a video game, and yet you have tech priests destroying STCs or hiding away advanced AI. Call is just inventing things and flat out working with Xenos. It's such a complex and interesting faction with so many characters that you've never even heard of, most likely, and that's because they're buried or just living in media that most people don't interact with if they're not already an AdMech fan. KX and Hadron from Darktide, Faustinius, Kefra, Vitex, and Scaevola from Mechanicus, and that goofy-ass Magos from Space Marine 2. There is a genuine appreciation to be had for these characters when they pop up, and yet it feels like AdMech is the most underrepresented part of the Imperium, despite the fact that they keep it running. They're running fucking Shadow Wars against the Necrons, and no one is giving them attention. Call is my favorite character in all 40k right now, I feel, and I urge you to listen to both the great work in Gene Father if you just want to see how batshit funny he is. He is the one guy in 40k who can get away with whatever he wants, and he knows it so well that he just keeps pushing the envelope on both Gilliman and the rest of the Imperium. This video has gone on for long enough, and I don't know if I fully explained what makes AdMech fun or why they're the best designed faction in 40k. Looking at them, they're wholly unique. They blend so many different styles together of body horror, Martian death ray, diesel, and steampunk, and somehow have created an entirely unique faction that has an identity entirely on its own. Space Marines are all different cultures on Earth, but they use steroids. Sisters of Battles are just Giga Catholics. Eldar and Tau take inspiration from Japanese culture in completely different ways. Orcs are from Birmingham, you get it. The inspiration for this faction can be easily tracked, but for AdMech, it's hard to do that at face value. You're usually shocked with how detailed the minis are, that it's just impossible for you to think of anything other than, holy shit, that looks like a pain in the ass to paint. Words cannot describe how cool AdMech is, but describing them does, and I suppose that's the point of this video. They are much more complex from what their design means, how their religion works, all the way to the point where you have people, like I said, writing Bible quotes for a video game. They sell sensors. I own it. I used it on my router and it worked. We haven't gone even into like machine spirits, and honestly, the more I make these videos, the more I feel the need to talk about the game separately, or at least give them a feature-length film on all my thoughts and opinions on everything. But I'm not a tech priest. My words can only go so far and for so long until my lungs give out. So to close this out in a somewhat appeasable time frame, I want to leave off with this. No one is disposable, so long as they do the Omnissiah's work. Thus it is written. Thanks for listening. This is editing. I don't know what to actually call myself yet because I don't want to use my real name, but this is editing me here. I just want to say, I did not expect to get 1,000 videos, or 1,000 holy shit, I'm so stupid. I'm not going to edit this part out. I did not expect to get 1,000 views on my first video. Right now, I think it's at like 1,300 or something crazy like that. Genuinely, thank you. I've been trying to do YouTube through various other means for like the past 5 years or more, it's felt, and I'm not going to expect that kind of turnout again for what I'm doing, but hey, maybe if I keep clickbaiting everybody, they'll actually just keep coming. But genuinely, thank you for sticking around and watching this video. I really appreciate it. I don't really know what the next video is going to be. Right now, I'm just kind of going through my journey of how I got through the hobby and what interested me. Maybe that'll be interesting enough. I don't really want to make a hard format for what I'm doing yet, because I kind of want to just feel my way through YouTube and see what works and what doesn't. Regardless, this has been the Man in the Broken Tower, and I appreciate you being here. See you next week.